I didn't even realize, when you look at Indonesia, it's so big that if you go left to right, it's the same size as the United States. I moved there for work. My work sent me out there to do an assignment. It was not so bad. They're like, do you want to go? And I said, sure.
How long were you out there for?
Over 2 years. Okay. Yeah, I lived there, lived in Singapore, and kind of did work and kind of managed a team that was all of Asia. So I had to go everywhere. So it was nice. Australia, New Zealand, Japan.
Once you're moving out to Singapore for work, is it like the music stuff, the button's going to be paused?
Oddly enough, in this story, it wasn't paused. Right, so it was sort of, part of the waiting or hoping that this was going to come, because my songs and work was done for years. I went to Singapore in 2017. At that point, I'd already been kind of 3 to 4 years with the songs, just kind of.
You're talking specifically the follow-up to Meadowlands?
Yeah, a couple of those songs had already been just sitting there, just kind of waiting. But then when I went over there, I remember one of the very first questions I asked the band was, if I go, will this hurt our chances of finishing the record? And they said, absolutely not. So I said, okay. I said, I'll give it a go.
What year would that have been roughly?
2017. Yeah, I remember I asked the question in March of 2017.
Okay, so it had already been, 15 years? Whatever would have hurt the potentials of the album coming out had already hurt the potential of the album coming out.
Yes, by most band standards, the other 13 years of just, yeah.
You must have considered taking a solo path or playing around with other people at some point in the interim.
I know this is kind of the hardest thing to believe or to even realize, even to myself. I never did. I started the band. I just never believed or ever thought to do any music. And sort of my record shows it, right? I never played in another band. I've never done a solo show. I've never done a solo. I've never written about myself anywhere. It's only been the Wrens. And that's the only thing I ever wanted. And I never said to myself, hey, I was in the context of the Wrens, and we talked about once we do this, we can kind of go do things and all this kind of fanciful dreams. But that was always the primary.
Living out here, I saw Charles do a bunch of solo shows, so he was doing his thing. Was part of it for you that you were family, work, everything else? I mean, it's hard to do a solo record on top of that.
He would attest to it. He started doing solo shows even when we were doing the Meadowlands, like in the late 2000s. So he kind of started that whole venture sooner because I had a day job and he was kind of, in flux between his work and what he wanted to do. So he was kind of putting in that work. And I think, and just being very blunt and honest with you, I was just very scared. I was very insecure, very nervous, and that kept me.
With a band, you've got reinforcement.
The Cocoon, especially that band. I've been in it since I was 18. It's a bit of a warm blanket, and I have safety. So, and I didn't have belief in my talent to, that anyone would like the songs or the singing or, it's just an insecurity thing.
What do you think that comes from? I mean, obviously people were waiting with bated breath for a new Wrens record.
I think in terms of me ever wanting to do anything by myself, it's a mix of things. I think, part is, life and family came on and kids, and that was like in my 40s. So yes, that took over time. And then work, right, of course, right? So it wasn't like I was just a musician.
For Pfizer still? Is that right?
I worked for Pfizer for a long time, and now I work with J&J.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you went from one vaccine, you went from double dose to single dose. You're somebody who takes your job very seriously to such a point where you were willing to fly literally halfway across the world for it.
Absolutely. It was a great opportunity, and I work for J&J now, and it's an incredible company. They really do promote a really 360 type of person, right? What do you do? How do you support work? What's your out? What do you do? So yeah.
In terms of them being supportive of.
Yeah, they're very, do your job, but we want you to have the right life. But yeah, so they sent me on assignment, and it's a very important offering.
That's nice and feasible to an extent, but obviously most people when music is their main thing, and and pretty much nobody at this point is doing that without some sort of day job, but you need something with full flexibility. And I assume that Pfizer, you can't take 3 months off the tour.
Yeah, it's always been that way. Even with the Meadowlands, we were sneaking out on Friday and then working on the weekends and going back to work, right? And we would take vacation when we could. So many bands and so many artists, right, live in that space.
It's funny, I just talked to Josh Cater from the Smoking Popes, and
they
were very much caught up in that 90s major label, signing everybody, putting people out there, and they had their moment. And it seemed like you had maybe a taste of that, or at least obviously were, doing your thing in the 90s when all of that was happening.
It's interesting. We were on a small scale with Grass that had money, but they didn't have any sort of clout or kind of structure. And in a weird way, I think this kind of helps the Wrens story or my music career, our musical career, is that we were never we were never the Smoking Popes. No one ever wanted us. It really was a
The
weird...
Smoking Popes would probably tell you that they weren't the Smoking Popes in that respect.
But I just recall that.
No, for sure. I mean, there was this moment.
There were name bands that were kind of getting this groove, and
it was just this like vacuum that was sucking up anyone that could be the next Nirvana.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that was a huge moment. But no, it wasn't. It wasn't for us. That's for sure. Yeah.
For you, there wasn't ever really a point where it felt like that music would just be the thing.
Actually, we jumped off the cliff many times before even Secaucus in '95. We all left our jobs and went on a tour, and then realized that we had to pay rent and had to get real, and that ended. And then we kind of did it again. During the Meadowlands or before the Meadowlands, we thought that is. So yeah, we tried. It wasn't for the lack of trying. We didn't do the one thing where it's like, that's it. We're in a van and we're never coming home until we make it. And, because we saw too many horror stories of bands that they always believe like the old stories of like the REM and all that kind of stuff. You get in a van and it's going to be a happy ending. It's not always...
everybody's Henry Rollins. Not everyone is built for that.
Yeah, exactly. We played with this band. I can't believe I'm just remembering you said Henry Rollins. We played with this band called Branch Manager. And this is an old DC band. And they just lived in their van like for years. I mean, it was like were
they like a Discord or Discord adjacent
kind of?
Yeah.
And great band, but it's just like, boy, I couldn't do that stuff. I couldn't live that life.
So it sounds like he kept crashing down to earth on a fairly regular cycle.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's very much so. I mean, our life was crashing down for the entire 30 years, right? Expectations and didn't kind of pan out. And
in spite of these sort of numerous crashings down to earth, what's kept you going?
I would say it was really always the music and the mission of what we were doing. And
what was the mission?
The mission has always been what it's been, is sort of like the band, right? Is that this,
The mission is the music. The
music
is the mission.
Yeah, very well stated. And just this belief in this kind of thing that we've done where it's never really been super successful, but it's certainly been more than enough for us in our lives, and it defined who we were and how we are. And there's so many of my life decisions were based upon the Wrens.
Well, sure.
Any artistic venture or business that people do.
Well, certainly one that is at least successful to the point that people are paying attention to it.
That's right. Yeah. But what kept us through is, or what kept me through is just this sort of thing that always keeps me through. It's just, and I think that's kind of revealed to me as I've gotten on with my career, is that so many people do what we're doing here. Artistic kind of aspects of their life, which is either compensated by some other area or what have you, but it's something they can't help themselves but do. And I think it's a beautiful thing that I didn't realize younger. Younger was always like, oh, we're going to be famous, we're going to get money, like this weird fake dream, and that kind of sets up weird sadness, because you're...
At what point did you realize that you weren't going to get rich and famous?
I think in 1990. I think the dream really kind of ended...
Oh, the dream changed.
The dream, the dream definitely changed. It still is changing, and even my relationship with the dream. But I would say that we all realized we weren't going to make it, sort of like in that period before the Meadowlands, where we were like, this is never going to be our career. We're just not in that space. I'd say in like 2000.
Was that an influence on the record?
Yeah, certainly with us. I think with all great artists, I think obstacles and challenges help, and that helps you focus in. And I think the fact that we came to the realization that, or I did for me, that this was not going to be what I dreamed my whole life up to that point, right? Like, it's not going to end the way I think. So we thought it was the last record, or I thought it was the last record, so let's just go for broke and make it as good as we can.
Throughout the recording, you assumed that the Wrens just weren't going to happen again after that.
Yeah, in particular for the Meadowlands, we had nothing. Nobody was calling us. Nobody was interested. They still kind of remember. They remember the Secaucus record to a certain degree, but it wasn't. Nobody was knocking down our door, right? That's for sure.
I was reading an interview that you did recently, and you said, and this makes sense in hindsight, but it hadn't occurred to me that it was almost like a 5-year cycle for the thing to actually break. So like 2008, like people started paying attention, or
it was really very. It kept, I think almost in a weird way, it was sort of as the internet was growing up, we sort of caught these little waves of that, and then the show would kind of complement that. So we would play these gigs, it would be the right gig at the right time, and that would kind of capitalize on it. And also, I think artists get so stressed out about like when a record releases, and it's got to be most people don't really want the record when it releases. I mean, they do, but they like the record 6, 8 years later, right, or months later. So that kind of helped us because we couldn't tour on a regular cycle. So we might have seen the Meadowlands like 3 years later in a town. So yeah, the time helped us.
I think you might be one of a very small group of people who are helped out by not releasing a follow-up record.
Yes.
by there almost being a sense of maybe mystique around it. I saw you, I can't even remember what year it would have been, but I think it was at the Bell House.
Oh, wow.
So this would have been like well after the record came out. And just the sense of like, yeah, I don't know, these guys might not play again together. It's like, I definitely need to go to this show.
That's very nice of you. And we always kind of felt that way too, because it really was a patchwork. We were never one of those bands like, we're going to have a summer tour. We're going to have a fall tour. It was like, this might be it.
Yeah. And that was because of family lives, day jobs?
Kind of. Yeah, kind of because we just sort of really never got our shit together.
Yeah. Well, you got your shit together, but you got your shit together in like the more traditional sense of getting your shit together.
Yeah. It was more the life stuff. And and that took over a lot, right? Because when we released the Meadowlands, we were all three. Well, Jerry was married, and he had 2 kids, the drummer. But Greg, Charles, and I were single guys living in one house.
I think a lot of bands can sort of succeed as like dad bands, as like just sort of like weekend bands, just getting together and play some like Creedence covers or something. But like that clearly was not going to be the lot for the Wrens.
No, and I appreciate that, because we, even though we're dads, it was never like that thing, especially because we had lived in the house for so long, and we kind of really focused it as the band. It wasn't as like, let's like you said, play some Creedence covers and, hang out and have some beers. We were never, ever that band.
2 years, it didn't feel like the end for you?
It didn't. Actually, I was waiting quite a bit, and even when I would come home, I would, ask how things are going. I would come home for specific reasons. Maybe we could mix it, or because I kind of believed that it was going to be done while I was there.
What made you feel that was going to happen? Because it hadn't happened for the previous 15 years.
And this is the hard part to kind of explain, because it's just insanity. I mean, if you want to look at it one way, it's like, you're that gullible.
Did you feel like you were maybe lighting a fire under them by moving to the other side of the world?
We mastered it 4 days before I left for Singapore. So I had every belief that it was going to be done. You know what I mean? So it's sort of like one of those things where you really hope and whatever. It was also very positive, because the band would be like, if the record gets done and we release it and you're over there, time has never hurt us. We'll just release it and then we'll play shows after. Like, everyone was really super chill about that, which is great. Over 2 years went by, and then it didn't get done.
I always assumed that part of what contributed to the period of time was that, like, at a certain point, the pressure of following up a record 15 years later is momentous.
Yeah, I can only speak for myself, but in conversations, I do think that it kind of added in, right? And the more people would say, expecting it to come up. But I must be honest, I never had a fear of it. Because in some ways, I knew you just can't beat that. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't, that moment with, it's such a great story, right? Knowing Ryan and Pitchfork was Pitchfork at that time. And we were still indie enough where it cared for those bands. And we had the right songs. And even the music around that time was kind of all similar, like Not a Serfs. And it had that weird moment. But I do think that I was like, well, this follow-up's going to be our 4th record. People didn't love our first. They were kind of okay with our second. They really liked our third. And maybe this one's like somewhere in the middle. As long as it's complementary to it and supports it. And we made a very conscious effort, both Charles and I made it, and Greg and Jerry, that this record should not be some left turn. We weren't going to make our disco record or like our electric record. It really was sort of like this next kind of genesis of what the Meadowlands might be in our minds.
Meadowlands was kind of a left turn, though, right? I mean, it sounded really different than what came before it.
Yeah, I would definitely think that we were, our punk rock edge was dulled down, and our Beatle volume was turned up, right? Because we really, at that time, we went after, but as I said, I believed it was our last record, so it was like, let's make the best record we possibly could make.
Which is not something you can afford yourself when you're really caught up in everything, when everything's moving super fast.
Yeah, we feel bad for our friends, that were kind of in those bands, like a band like The Hold Steady, who we're really good friends with and were a great band, or Bright Eyes, or any of these, or like The Faint, where all of a sudden they get like these really hot records, and they have to come out with the next record right away. It's like, it's hard to kind of, unless you do sort of like The Hold Steady, we're in the groove, like they could do a couple records that were kind of similar.
There must have been like a little jealousy at the time, though, of like watching people.
I can tell you, and I haven't told anyone this, I remember I was working in the city, and I was here in New York City, and I remember the day that The Hold Steady were playing the David Letterman show. And it was a beautiful day. I remember this to this moment, and they're great friends. And
they deserve it.
I don't have a jealous bone in my body. I could not have been happier, because it was like, holy shit, The Hold Steady is going to be on David Letterman, and they're kick-ass. It was great, and they were awesome. But I was like, could we have? Sure. So there's that moment of like that pang where I was like, Wow, right? If
You've
we've
been
done
banging your head against the wall for a decade at that point.
yeah, oh yeah, easily, right? And not that the David Letterman show was our main goal or whatever, but it's part of the whole getting your music to as many people and all that kind of stuff.
If the Meadowlands was a left turn and was, I don't know if thoughtful is the right word, but was
Yeah, introspective, thoughtful.
introspective and had more time to sort of spread out, and some of you hadn't heard yourself before. I mean, the new record is even more so. It starts off on an extremely quiet note.
Yeah, thanks. This record is that. Actually, there's moments, because half of the record was made, during COVID or very quickly, right? And there was periods where I'm just like, am I going too close to the bone?
I haven't had a lot of time with it because we just set this up, but the thing that really jumped out at me at the beginning is you can actually hear the sound of the keys of the piano.
I went for that specifically because it's sort of like I wanted it to be that close and that intimate to kind of get into this. I tried to make it a story, right? And I think everyone that works on a piece or a record that they care about, it should be a bit of a journey. It should be a cycle. It should be whatever. But I wanted to bring the lens in so close. Like I was imagining like a cinematographer that it's so close you can actually you only see their hand to start the movie or something to that effect. And that's where I wanted the record to kind of be. So it's sort of, it grows in its cinematic, this
pulls out.
That pulls out, it gets big and then has these moments. But yeah.
Which is a bold thing to do if you're somebody who had for, an extended period of time been worried about being front and center, and most of the band is on the record at some point, and obviously it is a full band, but it is you, and that's scary. I decided to jump off the deep end.
I said if I can get in as close as I could, and then have then when I was nervous about the vocals or whatever, right, whatever my own fears are, I figured, well, let's make sure they're kind of heard and clear, right? Really, where you're afraid, go for where you're afraid.
I don't know who said it. You might know, but in the press material, you're a great singer, and your best quality is that you don't know you're a great singer.
Oh my God! Well, if you would know me in the intimate world, you would know my fear of it. It's just
of singing specifically.
Yeah, horrifically. So
because you were in a band with other singers, everybody sang.
Charles is a beautiful singer, just an incredible. His voice, just love to hear it, right? And I loved singing with him, and I loved doing my stuff too. But it was not. I've always been in a band, right? I'm a band guy. I'm not like a singer guy. Yeah. It's there are bands that have great singers, and I've just never been that. So even when I was doing this recording, Tom Brosier kind of helped with this, and he's like, you have to do the vocals now. He's like, you got to do them all. But he helped a lot too. It was really, really nice.
And you've always been kind of timid about singing in front of people?
Oh yeah, it is. Even our gigs, our shows, I would always be super nervous.
Well, you say even at your gigs, and maybe this is as somebody who doesn't perform, but I would assume especially it's more scary in front of people.
Because there's no net. And the only thing that's good about in the old days is that no one was recording you.
And then everything's loud. And
everything's loud. It could be weird.
Is, cacophonous, right?
Yeah,
and
totally.
It's going to be fun regardless.
And you get the energy from it. But, I'm happy on this record that I went where I think on everything, even just putting this and having this conversation with you about this record. Everywhere I was afraid, I said, I'm just going to, I'm too old to be afraid.
How else did that manifest itself on the record?
I think just completing it and just enjoying it.
Just doing the damn thing?
Just kind of like the fact of, and I think the challenge of getting it done, right? And I will tell you, it's during COVID, I really got into just songwriting and what it means and how to do it. It's just like the writer or...
Did you not have that connection before? You'd written a lot of songs, and you had songs finished for the record.
I know that we did I had a bar of a standard, whereas if someone that I really respected came in and asked me to do a song, could I do it? Because I think a lot of times artists do little parts and they do sections and they have this weird thing. It's never like a song. Whatever you dress them up in, drums, keyboards, sitars, it doesn't matter. It's still at the heart of it has to be a song with some sort of melody, rhythm, and chords, right? Or sonic notes to accompany. And I wanted to make it that I could start, middle, end, them. So that was a challenge unto itself, right? Not singing in the shower, actually. So yes, I focused a little bit more on, is this a good song? Is it the best song I can do?
And you did go for it from the standpoint that you play the majority of instruments on this record.
Yeah, actually, I think with very small exceptions, I'm playing all of them, right? So
I think maybe drums was...
Yeah, Jerry, of course. Yeah. Jerry plays all the drums. and some percussion here and there, right? The drums were all Jerry, but yeah, bass, keyboards. There's cellos, there's violins, and I can't play the cello or violin whatsoever. But had fun trying.
What's that process like? I mean, you know, obviously, like, and those two instruments in particular, like, these are things that, like, kids are studying when they're 3.
It really is this, it's a poor man's dream of the orchestra. And it's so poor, in fact, that sadly, I think the violin was a friend's that her daughter left from school in the house. So it was like a grammar school violin. And then the cello, I specifically went to a music store. I rented it for 3 days. And I came home and I taped it up. So it had tape all over the cello for the notes because I didn't know where I was going. And it's on Leaves. It's on a bunch of other ones. But like, and in my mind, I think it's like, it sounds like the Eagles or something, like those kind of orchestras, you know? And,
like Pet Sounds or something.
Yeah.
I am no expert, but I do think that maybe those string instruments are ones that you can kind of fudge in that, like,
you have a little openness in the tone.
Yeah,
that's right.
You're not like, it's, you know, you're not doing a fiddle solo.
Yes. It's, I'm not, Devil Went Down to Georgia. There's no solos in that. So you're right. It adds a timbre and a sonic.
It sounds a little bit like micromanaging from the outside.
Yeah, I think it's just color. It's trying this and sort of what sometimes the song would want.
I understand why you wanted more instruments on there, but why were you the one to play them? All or mostly?
Yeah, I would have had you play it if you want. I'm the least person that way. It's really just you're there. Yeah. It's just you're there in the basement. In
spite of the fact that it has been many years since the last record, everything happened really quickly.
Yeah, 5 of the songs were recorded still in my basement at my house, and that was done in 2013, and then kind of just waited till now. But yeah, then COVID kind of hit, and I was just checking my memos, my voice memos that I have on my phone here with us, and I was checking even as late as last Thanksgiving, early December, I didn't have many of the songs kind of done and in place. The lyrics were coming to them, and then it was on December 18th. I checked my December 18th of last year. I went on the 18th and 19th, and for the first time really ever into a studio in my life. I'm 50. First time I ever went into a studio to do recording, and it was just a wonderful experience. And Jerry came up and played some incredible drums. We did all the drums for 5 songs. 6 songs. It was 6 songs in one day.
You didn't use studios before just because of financial constraints, or it wasn't punk enough, or
both? You're exactly right. Yeah, it was a bit of the because when we grew up, studios were like where you made Fleetwood Mac records.
Sure, Electric Ladyland.
Yeah, right. It was a big deal, and we were actually always going against the grain. Even when we started the band, it was the whole rage was Nirvanas and Pearl Jams. There was no the bands. So we became like a the band. Yeah. And even then it was not in vogue. And then when
Nirvana sure as hell was recording in studios.
Oh yeah, massive, huge things, right? So it was really out of money and punk rock kind of ideals, right? That we always did. So yeah, it was the first time going to the studio and recorded the drums in one day. And the second day I went back, December 19th, that Saturday, I went back and did basses and guitars and stuff like that, pianos.
It's interesting to sort of like knock all of the same instrument out at once. Yeah. You just had to be in kind of that headspace. You're in bass headspace.
Yeah, and because I had no expectation that it was going to go anywhere. I really was doing it for the enjoyment of my love of music and just wanting to do it because I was still thinking that there was going to be a Wrens thing.
So your expectation wasn't that you weren't going to finish it, and it wasn't that, I mean, maybe to some degree it was a concern that people weren't going to listen, because I think that's just kind of built into you. And I trust me, I get that. It was more that this was almost like a dry run for a Wrens record for you.
It was really just through COVID. I just wanted to go and do music. Unfortunately, it's almost that simple. Whereas like I wanted to go and have some time in the studio and record and see where these songs would come. It never expected to go where it went.
Not to be morbid about it, but I mean, in these sorts of conversations, it's kind of unavoidable that you wake up one day and you're 50 and you're like, it's been 18 years. What am I waiting for? Do people want a Wrens record when we're, 60?
Do people want a Wrens record now? It almost doesn't matter, right?
Yes, I mean, yes.
You're exactly right.
Objectively, yes, they do. I just want to be on the record as saying that, yes.
And me too, right? Yeah. I always will, and that would be a wonderful kind of experience. And I was always proposing that too. I was like, why don't we just trash all these songs, go do a punk rock record, take all this big expectation, right? And then it got weird with that whole moniker of the Chinese Democracy record, which I was just adamantly and vehemently against.
That was something people were projecting on you?
Kind of. And then
just being like overblown?
Yeah, and it seems like it was being kind of promulgated from us. And, because I'm not
Yeah.
the one that ever is kind of writing about it. I was just not happy with that.
Who was promulgating that internally?
Well, I would say it was Charles doing the interview with Steve Hayden, I think, where they were kind of talking about it. And just as soon as it went down that road, I was like, this is not a good road.
Given an infinite amount of time to work on a record, invariably it's going to be too much.
People just don't like it. The reason why the Meadowlands was so successful because absolutely 0.0 people cared. People love to discover music and art. I do. And when you're told, it just takes, it does something to the whole kind of, the art of surprise or in art is very helpful, right? I don't know. Why does everyone like Squid Game? I don't know, because 3 months ago, nobody knew about Squid Game.
I think the reason why Squid Game or like Tiger King or whatever were popular is because they were these communal experiences at a time when there was no community. And maybe there's something to that. I mean, maybe if you're at the level that the Wrens are at, I can still be like, this is my thing. This is not an album that everybody loves, and that's part of why I love it.
Yeah, no doubt. No, absolutely. And I think there is, and I do think that the Wrens have created that, and that's much to our hard work over many, many, many years, is that there is a bit of a community. I've always said it for years, that we were sort of like that local small restaurant that but in New York City, in New Jersey, you know what I mean?
In New Jersey, right, still, exactly, right. In this giant world, you were still able to cultivate that. I do like the idea of sort of doing a punk rock record. Obviously it's a young man's game to some degree.
I threw out every option to kind of see if we can get us out of this sort of way. But I was like, hey, look, if it's going to be this, it's great. Because we really kind of wanted, to make it like an epic, right? So we're like, okay, well, is this really the epic novel? Is this part of our career where they'll look back and say, oh, that's really where they went deep and thick and long and all that kind of stuff?
I'm getting the impression now that that sort of that kind of hype and the height and the expectations of a long period of time after what ended up being a well-loved record, that wasn't something that you were necessarily feeling internally, but like the rest of the band did feel those pressures around having to essentially top yourself.
I would say that's fair enough. Yeah, of course, and you can understand both of those, right? You can absolutely understand, right?
Getting back to a couple of bands I've spoken recently who had that huge success early on.
Yeah.
And the question I love to ask them is whether or not it was a blessing or a curse. And I think, blessing from just like forward momentum of like just getting shot out of a cannon right out of the gate, but a curse from the standpoint of, and this is the same with really any occupation, that once you hit a certain level, anything below that is considered a failure.
Absolutely. I think, as you were saying, the dream changes or kind of moves in different waves. And I think my relationship with the dream had really changed.
You were in that mode of sort of chasing success early on.
Terribly so. Everywhere. I mean, we were so desirous of it. I mean, like I said, we didn't have our jobs. We were going to be it. That's all it was going to be. And then I do think and at that point when we kind of like had that last slap in the face, with the Interscope thing, and we just didn't have anything. That already is 13 years in. It's a long time. And I'm in my early 30s.
Not old, but maybe old for a band.
Not old, but for punk rock, it's certainly, or DOI's band, and it was another 3 years from then that we made the Meadowlands. I mean, so it was a really weird time in the forest. And I didn't have that live up to expectations just because I couldn't. And I would say that. I was like, if they grew up loving the Meadowlands from Pitchfork and they were their friends in college or wherever they discovered it or whatever time, you cannot replace that. All you can do is be complimentary to it. Yeah. That's it. And if you live with this expectation, you now can control people the way they're going to like it. Then it's an even darker rabbit hole. And the other part too is like, who are you making it for? If you're making it for yourself and you're happy, move on. If you really are looking for it, that's where I was going to head. Those bands, like, is it a blessing or curse? It also depends on what you want out of it. Yes, we did chase a dream, but once that dream died, now you're doing it for, like, I really humbly believe it with this record. The fact that I get to do this, it's like Madison Square Garden.
You removed the pressure from yourself by not making a Wrens record.
Just being very frank with you, I think I removed the pressure for the Wrens too.
This record specifically, you were able to do stuff that you couldn't do because there wasn't that pressure. Now, granted, that New York Times story maybe didn't help in the way that it was framed. Yeah. Publicity-wise, obviously, like, what a great thing to have come out to get people excited about the record, but also bittersweet for fans of the band. But pulling that out and just putting this thing into the world, you don't really have that 18 years of pressure in the same way that you would for a Wrens record.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's something that is important. What are you doing it for? And I just said I wanted to do music again, and the fact that I get to share it, and I was just saying if 3 people were happy with it, it really was full circle. It's going back to when we made Silver, or our first 7-inch. Nobody cared or wanted it. And it kind of feels good. But I still believe that could have been with the Wrens. Yes, people wanted it. But if you released a record that you really liked and you were absolutely, if you were confident with it, that you liked it. And I think that's sort of where we struggled. Did the Wrens like the record, right? Did the Wrens like the new record? The Meadowlands, it was 110%. Yes,
everybody was on board.
It was just like, this is great. And even the fourth Wrens record to be, I was very much a fan of it. Yeah. Right? I was like, this is going to be, people are going to like this. It's going to be deep. It's going to be darker, but they're going to dig it.
Once you sort of open up that valve and you're committed to this new project, this project that like doesn't literally have your name on it, but it is a solo record, the songs just start coming again?
You know, it was, so the commitment to have that happen was really after the fact. The commitment was just to enjoy music and to do some songs. And then I just got to a point when I shared with the guys, I was like, I just can't. I'll do anything except what we've been doing for 17 years.
I'll do anything except for nothing.
I'll go be in a kazoo band with you guys. I will go do whatever you might want to do, but I can't be in this band at the moment.
Treading water.
Just saying it's done. It's about to be done. Okay. Because it goes to your earlier question. It's like, well, why did you believe that? It's like, you just get to a point, it's like, and you would have to look at it from, in my shoes, I'd been believing it since 2003.
And it sure sounds like the record was done, but, you know, maybe wasn't mastered. Would it have been easier?
It wasn't mixed either. You know, I think it's a definition of what done is.
Sure. But like 80% of the way there, perhaps. But if there wasn't a specter of a fourth record, and if everyone was just like, hey, we put out 3 great records, we love them, we're just a bunch of dudes who are going to play together every once in a while, is that a level that you would have been comfortable with?
That's a very good question. And my honest answer is no.
No.
Probably. Yeah, I think I've always wanted it to be the band and the group and the 4 guys, because you figure it's like I said earlier, it's all the decisions I've made in my life. When to get married, when to have kids, where to live, what not to do, what job I should get.
It has revolved around this band.
Everything. Every single aspect of it, right? You know, not start a career until I was 34. I mean, just endless. I mean, the list is huge. So no, I do think that the Wrens story would have been complementary with another record, right? Sort of like the adult version. We had 2 kid records. We had a good mid-year, and it would be nice to kind of see what the adult version.
You said it not only took the pressure off yourself, but took the pressure off the bands.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you look at, you know, this moniker of what the Chinese democracy and what it would be, you could see where the river is going to go one way. And then it almost sort of does a disservice to the music that you did with such, believing that it's going to go into the same stage as like a Meadowlands. But it's not, right? Because people have these, they're only going to A-B right away. They just have to. But these are all kind of theories, right?
If push comes to shove, would you do another record the same way? Not with 18 years, obviously, but the way everything's
right, we don't have those years anymore. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that would still be, as much as I would dream about a punk rock record, we could, and I think we would be able to do it. I think that obstacle would be, you know, because we're not master songwriters, but I certainly think that we have enough where we could say, let's put together 8 songs that are kind of good. And so, yeah, I would love it.
I mean, this new record that you put out, this specific configuration outside of the Wrens, I know it's just like Schrodinger's cat situation of like what the status of the band is. If that feet dragging or water treading continues on, could you or would you want to put out another record the way this came out?
If I could. So I have no expectations of what's next.
Sure. Sure. But it sounds like it was a good experience.
Yes, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Truly wonderful. And it's made me so happy in music, just like when we released the Meadowlands and all the wonderful experiences. It's on par of just that. Yeah, very, very lucky. Like truly. Again, I keep saying it over and over again. I think it's just because I've been through so many ups and downs and seen so many near misses and near hits. You get a different perspective of it, right? And I'm so appreciative that I get to have a day with you and all that kind of stuff. And not to sound too, you know, Pollyanna about it, but it's what do you want to get? What are you really expecting to get out of it? And if 3 people that I can kind of connect with that really like the record and they take it away, that is as good as 30,000. It really is. It's not a... So, and if I wanted to be in the Wrens and we continued this sort of drag feet thing and still did songs and it was in a nice environment, yeah, I probably would still do that too. It's just to do music and to have fun. Or not to have fun. I don't want to make it sound like it's a party band, because we never were. We were always very serious. And even this record that I just put out, it's serious, right? It's our best attempt.
I do have to ask you about the Times piece, about what came next. In some ways, maybe the highest profile thing that was just written up probably about the Wrens period.
Just insane.
Came out. I mean, it's, huge feature on you and really dives pretty deep, but, it does sort of pick at some wounds at the same time, right? I mean, it alluded to the fact that you and Charles were on speaking terms at that point, but when that comes out and now that the record is really just right over the horizon for you, what have things been like since that article?
Yeah, I would say it's, look, you can't kind of unwind a clock, especially when, they've been my brothers and my friends since I was 18 years old. Like I keep saying, like I lived with Charles longer than I live with my wife currently. I mean, it's that deep of relationship and that kind of connection. So of course, I think there's hard feelings or, hard heart moments on both sides, right? Of course. And, this is not what you expected and right. And so I think coming after that, I think it's just a moment of just like, oh, well, this is sort of like a new reality. Like, I think that kind of brought a little bit more into like, oh boy, it's real. But yeah, it's hard. Of course.
I did as a songwriter for a while and she never wrote a song about me. I was totally fine with that until we broke up.
Huh.
And then I listened. This was back in the MySpace days. I saw it and listened to the song, and it was just like obviously really hard to experience that. If Charles does do this sort of his threatened soul record, is it something that you're going to listen to?
Oh yeah, I mean Charles started like we were talking, doing solo shows in 2000 and whatever.
But this is different, right? I mean, this is like the Wrens stuff that he's threatened.
Yeah, and from my heart is that there's probably not one person that's a bigger fan or a more appreciative person of him as an artist, as a songwriter. I was in his West New York apartment when he wrote and showed me his first song. I'm that person, right? And I get to do it. I was lucky enough with the Wrens, with Jerry and Greg, to kind of do all those things that help build up to those songs. And I was that person. And here I would be the first person that would buy it, the first person that would listen to it, and probably be the one that loves it the most. Hands down.
Do you know if he's listened to your record?
I don't know. He loves music, so I wouldn't doubt that he would, right? He's certainly agnostic in that way, his love of music. It's certainly it's a sensitive and it's sort of an important story, right? Because it's for people's lives, right? And again, it's not just me and Charles. It's Greg and Jerry too. It's an interesting one, that's for sure.
As I sort of said at the top, obviously there is a ton of bands out there, many of them your contemporaries, that have been going with one member tops, right? Yeah. And have cycled through people. And
I could never do that.
I get the sense that there's no Wrens without the four of you.
No, never. Yeah. I love the three of them way too much. I love what we did. I have zero interest in that. I would never want to go to a show where it's like a faux Wrens show. That'd be hideous. I would never do it. The one thing about a Wrens show or whatever, we were there. We were full and present. Might not always been great, but yeah.
It was enjoyable.
Yeah. I'd rather, but if it's going to be a Wrens show, it's the four of us for sure.
So we've been talking sort of hypothetically about, next records and that next step. But in the interim, what do things look like, with stuff sort of starting to open back up? I mean, is this something that you are going to play live?
I would love it. It would be a great experience if we can get some shows. I'm going to do a South by Southwest kind of thing, so that'll be fun. And I haven't done a show since 2010. So like
all these people who are complaining about not playing since the pandemic started, you're like, come on, guys. Like, I can beat that. I was going to say, yes, you can understand if it's their livelihood. Yeah. But if it's just like they want to play a gig, it was like, the last gig I had was December of 2009. Yeah, but you must have missed it. The life took over, but of course I missed it, right? Because it really was. And as the Wrens, we were never like a really hip band. We were never like a party band. We never went to clubs. You were a party band in a sense. We were party, but I mean like in the sense that you partied. Right, exactly. I mean, we did with ourselves, but it was small groups of friends, but it wasn't like our lifestyle. Like we were really always nerdy guys that went home and just kind of like would rather watch PBS, and that was sort of who we always were. So yes, to miss those shows and the energy, right? I don't know. Maybe looking back, we should have played shows. Maybe that would have helped us. I think that's undeniable. Yeah, I think. And you did a few here and there. As I said, I saw you, whatever year that was at the Bell House. I mean, that is, I think, the official last time we played was the Bell House of April for the Haiti Festival. That was the last time we actually played. There was like a cake being passed around. Does that sound familiar? That was Jerry. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. See, again, like like I said, without Jerry, there's no Wrens. It's just, it's that whole thing. That was all his shenanigans. But yeah, that was April of 2010. I get why it was difficult to come together and put a record out. Why were shows so hard? Just because you didn't have an album? What's so funny is we were just kind of dumb. Now sitting here with you, I'm telling you, I've never had that idea.
or no one ever broached that idea.
Yeah.
I should say.
But the idea of just like of coming up when you did as a band, it was just understood that tours happen around album releases.
I guess I would say that was probably it. And it probably could have helped us make the record sooner. It could have helped some of the relationship stuff, I guess. Not that there's any really trouble with the relationship there, but there's been some rocky spots, right? It's all relationships, But yeah, I do wish now if I look back, and it's a whole decade. I'm literally looking at a decade of my life because I've been playing shows live since I was 12 years old.
We all get this, as you get older, obviously those decades contract, but also it would be one thing if you didn't also have another life. Like if this was it for you, like that would be a very long decade.
But it is still kind of miraculous that an entire 10, 11 years with not one somebody saying, hey, should we play a show?
Beyond South by Southwest what's the sort of feasibility of you actually, doing more shows?
If people are interested to come out in whatever kind of capacity or place, I would love to do it.
I hate using the word buzz, but based on buzz, I think people want to see what's going on.
Yeah, I think you can kind of do that. And, I've been lucky. I've seen a lot of these things, but it comes back to the music. If people hear the record and then they're like, I'm into it, or kind of brings it, then so it could be.
Which is a little counterintuitive because usually like you play in the lead up and you keep playing and now you're just like, you're still trepidatious.
Kind of. I'm very proud of it. I think it'll find an audience or people that will kind of, enjoy it. And yeah, if it's like where we're sitting right here, just to 15, 20 people, I couldn't be happier, right? Because, you figure we were lucky enough to play like Pitchfork Festival to 21,000 people.
We're over here in Alphabet City. Yeah. And I spent a lot of my early years in New York here. I dated someone who lived at 9th and A.
Oh, you're kidding.
A couple blocks from here.
Right.
And Ray was talking about brownies before. Yeah. And it's like, and there's this thing that happens where you develop a sense of romanticism, regardless of how squalid and how much squalor you were living in and like whatever you felt and how cramped and, shitty those shows were. And
absolutely.
Those nights like sleeping on floors or whatever. It's, man, you start to miss it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great concept. So I think that what I try to talk about in the record is, or here, why can't you kind of still have it? Why do you have to go in degrees and not have it? It doesn't need to be in these intense pockets where you were probably sleeping on floors more than you expected. Or our brownie shows were really kind of like really karate.
But you hit 50 or even 40 and you don't want to sleep on floors anymore.
You don't want to do it, but there's a part of you that longs to do it. Yeah. So can you still be able to do it? It's sort of like, it really is the theme of the record. It's like, how do you kind of make sure that you keep that young part of you or that energy still in this world, not to give up, really not to just don't give up.
How do you?
I think it goes back, it's forcing yourself into those uncomfortable kind of things and just realizing how much you do enjoy it, right? To go and play a show in front of 10 people in a bar, I haven't done it in a long time. And I did it for years and I did it for decades.
Listen, man, even like getting out of my apartment at this point over the past 2 years, I'm totally serious too. Cause like, I know. As I was saying, like, and this is like, this is my first in-person interview and since the beginning of the pandemic. And it's just like, it's weird, and part of this is a symptom of the pandemic, but I think other is just sort of like progressions that we go through in life. But even leaving my apartment is kind of getting out of my comfort zone at this point.
Absolutely. No, I think you're hitting on it right, hitting the nail on the head, and now hopefully in the cycle, you'll say, oh, I left my apartment, I did this thing. You go back in a couple of days like, wow, I kind of enjoyed it. Yeah. Not this in particular, me or the conversation, but just the function of it. You sort of enjoy it. And you're like, okay, maybe I'll do it again. And
that's why I used to do these in person.
Kind of. Yeah, I think that's what happened with me with the songs and the music. It was like, oh my God, I think I finished the lyric and it's like, oh, I enjoyed that. I forgot that I enjoyed it, right? Because I think you're 100% right.
Isn't that wild that you can forget that?
Yeah, but I think you really forget it. I think you completely forget it.
A, you have to compartmentalize just generally in life, but B, you have to kind of put it aside because you can't be completely sentimental. Yeah. That'll ruin your life.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why what is the evolution of that kind of relationship to that thing? Obviously you've been doing these for a long time, or you've had interviews and conversations and writings for a long time. It begs the question even back to you. It's like, well, why are you here? Why are you actually talking to some guy about some record and some band? You really kind of don't even have an answer. You're like, something is willing me from some weird place to get out of my comfort zone to kind of do it.
And that's analogous to you making music?
Yeah, pretty much. Right? Because I think to your point where it's like you struggle to get out of your house, I think everybody, if they're honest, is a little like that. Then you start to make up excuses for yourself. And I think I did that for a long time too. Well, I can't do music because I'm waiting on the Wrens.
That's a good excuse. It worked for so long.
Yeah. And then I was like, wow, really? Now it's not even enjoying the waiting or what have you.
Sure, but you had the added disadvantage of knowing that that pulling out that Band-Aid was gonna hurt everyone a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I really think you're hitting on something that is probably what took us so long, is because you get in this groove. It's almost easier to live in that world. Like, it's going to come out. It's almost done. That's better than the reality. But you forget that the reality is cool too. Yeah. It's not that getting so wonky and deep, but I think you're hitting on a lot of these kind of deep problems or whatever drivers.